when my folks took me to a rough, scary, rundown neighborhood called Manayunk, just outside of Philadelphia along the Schuylkill River. Got some Philadelphians here. And they said, let's try out a new place we heard about called Mama's Pizzeria. It was my first real pizza. There were no chains, and pizza was not ubiquitous like it is now. Pizza was exotic, and for us it became destination food. The owner was a guy named Paul Castellucci, and over the years we followed him and his wife, Mary, to 2 other locations as the popularity of Mama's continued to allow them to upgrade to better neighborhoods, until eventually they settled into a place on Belmont Avenue in the upscale town of Bala-Cynwyd, on my side of the river, about a mile from where I lived. By then, they had added hoagies and cheesesteaks to the menu, usually made by Mary. This was true comfort food for anyone from Philadelphia. As I grew older, so did Mary and Paul's kids, who often worked behind the counter, helping their parents, especially on weekends, when the lines got pretty long. In my mind, it was the best pizza in the world. And also, I argued with my friends, because Philadelphians argue about such things, that they also made the best cheesesteaks. I loved the special cheese blend that they used. It was mozzarella, Parmesan, and a little cheddar. That was kind of like their secret ingredient. And they used ample amounts of it on their cheesesteaks as well as on their pizzas. The pizzas had a wonderful, crispy, puffy dough with big, open bubbles and blisters that would kind of char and poke up here and there on the top of the pizzas. When I was 17, I even did a short stint as a delivery boy for Mama's, and the aroma of hot pizzas and cheesesteaks filled my car and my senses with what now writers call an indelible taste memory. Even after going off to college, and for many years after that, I considered Mama's pizzas the benchmark of how great a pizza should be. All other pizzas I had during those years ranked against Mama's. And much as I love pizzas of any type, Mama's still reigned supreme. But then I grew up. And I got to eat a lot of pizza in the many cities where I lived during my spiritual and later my culinary journey, never growing tired of it. And I discovered that there were other pizzas as good as Mama's, maybe even better. My age of innocence was over. I even came up with an axiom that I still believe. There are only 2 kinds of pizza, good and very good. But then I started wondering what I meant by that difference between good and very good, and I realized that what I meant was actually the difference between good and great, which has become a recurrent theme in my writing and teaching. So then I had to define what I meant by that powerful but arguable word, great. After all, every pizza is also made with the same basic ingredients: flour, water, salt, yeast, cheese, sauce. What differentiates the good from the great? Why do some pizzas break from the pack and emerge as better than the others, as perfect pizzas? And here's how I resolved that definition, at least as it relates to pizza and maybe to other things as well. Great pizza, that is perfect pizza, is memorable. Something you can't wait to have again, to bring your friends to. You obsess about it. So I decided to write a book about the difference between good and great pizza, and to get to the heart of how and why some pizza makers, pizzaiolos as they're called, can achieve a type of greatness and perfection that eludes the others. What do they know, and what do they do that sets them apart and makes their pizzas memorable? But I needed a way to explore the subject in a more personal manner, and here's what happened. I was visiting my mom in Philadelphia, and I called my brother Fred and said, I'll be over at Mom's, and he said, hey, why don't I bring some pizzas and cheesesteaks from Mama's, and we'll have them for dinner? And I said, great, I haven't had that in like 30 years. And so he shows up about an hour later. As soon as he walks in the door, he's carrying 2 pizzas and 2 big cheesesteaks wrapped in butcher paper, and the aromas fill the room, and I'm suddenly transported back to my car when I was 17, delivering pizzas, all those taste memories just flooding back. And I couldn't wait to dive in, so I ripped off the paper from the cheesesteak and took a bite of that juicy cheesesteak with the juices dripping down my chin. And I say to Fred, my God, this is better than I remember it. And he just laughed, and he said, yeah, it's too bad you moved away because we get these all the time. And then I took a slice of pizza, and I took a bite of that, and I said, wait, Fred, this pizza's not as good as it used to be. Something's changed. And he says, no, it's the same. I said, no, it's different. The crust is different. Something's about this. He says, no, it hasn't changed. I said, no, it has changed. He says, no, it hasn't. He says, listen, what makes you think it's the pizza that's changed and not you? And that's when I got the idea for the book. I'm going to write a book about whether it's me or the pizza that has changed. So memorableness became for me the defining quality of greatness. And I further defined perfect pizza into two categories: contextually perfect and paradigmatically perfect. I think Malcolm Gladwell's starting to rub off on me. Contextually perfect pizza has to do with pizzerias of our youth, where we gathered with friends and family, and we went on dates. It's where we fell in love, maybe even where we broke up or got dumped. Mama's was, for me, the contextually perfect pizzeria. The pizzeria of wonderful childhood memories and those indelible taste and aroma memories. But then I discovered some places where I had no history or context, but where the pizza was just so extraordinary that it fulfilled the Platonic ideal of perfection, the paradigm of greatness on its own merits. Places like Frank Pepe's in New Haven, Al Forno's Grilled Pizza in Providence, Rhode Island. Now, again, if you've been to any of these places, please do shout out. Da Michela in Naples and other Naples places. Anybody here ever been to Naples for pizza? There we go. Okay, so that can change your mind about what pizza should be and ought to be. There's Pizzeria Uno and Due and Lou Malnati's deep dish pizzas in Chicago. Yeah, I knew I had to shout those out or I'd be in big trouble, because that's a whole other topic for discussion. It's Chicago versus New York style. One such perfect pizzeria exists in Phoenix, Arizona, and it's now quite well known, but when I first wrote about it over 15 years ago, it was still relatively unknown. Pizzeria Bianco, where Chris Bianco became the poster boy of what is now called the artisan pizza movement. His pizzas are paradigmatically perfect. Baked in a wood-fired brick oven for about 4 minutes, crispy crust made on a wet, long fermented dough, and every bite brings total delight. For those who became regulars, like Jimmy Kimmel, it is also contextually perfect. And here's what Chris told me when I interviewed him for the book, and I asked him to share any tips or secrets with my readers. So I said, what is it about your pizzas that, what can you tell people that might make their pizzas better? He says, listen, I think it would be a disservice to others if I just said, here's the tricks and the tips. Every pizza maker has their tricks. He says, but that's not what makes my pizzas good. It's not what makes them better. I said, well, what is it? He says, well, let's see. I make the cheese myself every day. I pull my own mozzarella. I said, well, that's pretty cool. And he says, yeah, and I make the dough by hand. I don't use a machine. We mix it by hand. I said, yeah, that's pretty unique. He says, yeah, but that's not it. He says, we grow our own basil and lettuce in the back, and I have relationships with my farmers and my suppliers. And I'm really picky about my ingredients. He says, but that's not it. I said, well, what is it? He said, it's because I'm the one who's making them. Well, everywhere I went after that, I'd be interviewing people, and they all would say the same thing. Hey, have you been to Pizzeria Bianco in Phoenix? So this place was all of a sudden on the map, and people were responding to it. It was having an influence on what was going on. And then we're talking about 15 years ago, when all of a sudden pizza went from there were maybe 20 places that I could write about in the book that met this criteria of greatness. And now, 15 years later, there's hundreds of places like this. So finally, after eating pizza all over the world, I returned to Philadelphia to complete my research for the book. I still had to answer the one haunting question posed by my brother Fred. Was it me or the pizza that had changed? And so I pulled into town and I called Mama's Pizzeria and I said, is Paul there? And this guy says, yeah, this is Paul. And I said, no, you're too young. I mean, Paul, the owner. And he said, oh, you're talking about my dad, Paul Sr. Yeah, he retired 10 years ago. This is Paul Jr. He said, nobody else in the family wanted the place, so it's mine now. And I said, really? And I said, well, listen, I'm writing this book. Can I come over and talk with you? He says, yeah, come on over. And so I pull up to Mama's, and I said, Paul, here's Paul. He's like, look at him. I said, the last time I saw you, you were 13 years old. He says, yeah, I'm 43 now. And I said, but I got to ask you something, Paul. Have the pizzas changed? And he starts laughing. He says, so you noticed. I said, they have, haven't they? He says, oh, yeah. He said, when my dad retired, he tried to find somebody that he could pass the pizzas on to because I never liked making pizzas. I'm a cheesesteak guy. I like making cheesesteaks. And he would hire people, but none of them could handle the dough the way he handled it. It was a very tricky dough. And so after a while, he just gave up and he just changed the formula and made it much easier. It's just idiot-proof now. And I said, yeah, but now it's like everybody else's pizza. It's like Pizza Hut pizza. And he says, I know. He says, I know. But you know what? I don't care. And I said, how could you not care? He says, because I don't like pizza. I like cheesesteaks. He said, you remember when I was a kid, I always used to hang out with my mom at the cheesesteak, at the little grill that we had where we made cheesesteaks and hoagies. And I said, you know, I remembered a year before when I had ripped open that butcher paper, the first words out of my mouth were, this is better than I remember it. And I also remembered reading about a week before I visited Mama's this last time, that they had been written up in an article by a well-known food writer who did a whole special issue on cheesesteaks. And at the end of the article, he said, you know, if you go to Philadelphia, don't go to Pat's and Gino's, the famous touristy places. There's lots of other way better places than that. But if you really want the best cheesesteak, go to Mama's Pizzeria on Belmont Avenue. Don't get the pizza, get the cheesesteak. It's the best cheesesteak you'll ever have. I said, did you know he said that? It's the best cheesesteak in the world, he called it. He says, no, I didn't know that. He says, I don't read things like that. I don't have a life. I'm making cheesesteaks all the time, you know? And he said, but thanks for telling me. I said, well, let me ask you something. You know, what is it about your cheesesteaks that makes them so good and makes them better? And he said, we use the special pizza cheese blend that my dad developed way back when. I said, yeah, I love that blend. And we use lots of it. I said, that's what I really love about these cheesesteaks. They're cheesy. He said, we don't use top round, which everybody else uses, top round beef. We use ribeye. I said, ooh, boy, that could make a difference. And he says, yeah, and we don't use the same rolls. Everybody uses Amoroso's hoagie rolls. They're very good. But we have a better roll. We have a bakery make our recipe, and we use our rolls. I said, yeah, those are all really great tricks. He says, yeah, but that's not what makes the cheesesteaks better. I said, what? He says, because it's me, I'm the one who's making them. And where have I heard that before? And he says, look, I got some orders piling up here. Why don't you relax? Let me make some cheesesteaks, and we'll talk again later. And so he goes behind the grill, and now I'm looking at the grill, and it's like 4 times larger than what his mom worked at. He says, you know, when my dad had the place, about 75 to 80% of our business was pizzas, and about 20 to 25% was cheesesteaks. Now, 80% of our business is cheesesteaks, and only 20% is pizza. We're making more money than ever before, and I'm getting to make what I love to make. And so he goes back there, and behind the grill, you know, he's kind of like what was a grill, not much bigger than this podium here, is now about the size of 2 of those pianos, you know, next to each other. And he gets behind it, and there's tickets piled up, and he starts laying out the cheesesteaks. And he's got his spatula, and he's got his meat, and he's at the right moment, he's putting the cheese on it. And just when the cheese melts perfectly, he gets it, he flips it, he slides it on the roll, he pulls off the butcher paper, he wraps it up, and he puts it on the pass. It's like he's dancing back there. He's in a zone. He's in his own world. And this is not a guy who's a big egotist or a big performer. He's just there doing what he loves, and he's got a little smile on his face, and he brings me a cheesesteak, and I take a bite out of it again. I said, these really are better than I remember them. He says, I just love making them. And so I got a chance to travel a little bit more and then write about it. But at that moment when he said, it's because I'm the one who's making it, that's when I realized I now knew what this book was going to be about. I've had a chance through Pizza Quest, which is sort of our website continuation of American Pie, to celebrate the pursuit of artisanship and craft, and it continues to bring me into contact with many other dedicated, talented pizzaiolos, the new players in the artisan pizza world. They personify the merging of paradigmatic and contextually perfect pizza. World champion Tony Gemignani, who you saw in the video tossing those pizza doughs, he's in San Francisco. Nancy Silverton is in Los Angeles. She's the original founder of La Brea Breads and now Pizzeria Mozza in LA. You saw her in the video. And then there's other players that came out sort of after the book was written. A guy named Brian Spangler in Portland, Oregon, has a place called Apisa Shoals, where he makes, you know it? All right, yeah. He makes a New Haven style pizza, kind of like in the Frank Pepe style. Maybe, arguably, maybe even better than in New Haven. I mean, he's taken it to another level. He's an artisan. And so he pays tribute to that style of New York, New Haven style in Portland, Oregon. There's a guy he's back in New York. He was in New York, then he went to San Francisco. Now he's back in New York, named Anthony Mangieri, sometimes known as the Pizza Nazi. He's got a place called Una Pizza Napoletana. Anybody ever been to that one? Oh, well, then you're just going to have to take my word for it. It's pretty extraordinary. We're going to be putting videos of him up on Pizza Quest soon. We got a chance to do some interviews with him. The point is that each of these people are committed to making perfect, memorable pizzas simply because they care about doing so more deeply than those around them. As Tony Gemignani puts it, and it's the very mantra of his amazing pizzeria in San Francisco, and it's printed on every box, respect the craft. So, back to Chris Bianco for a second. At the end of my interview with him, I asked him what he wants his customers to experience when they eat his pizza. He got very quiet. And then carefully, slowly, he tried to answer. I want them, he said, to experience my soul. Well, when have you ever heard a pizza maker say that? But this is the signature of an artisan, a craftsman, whether it be a pizza maker, a cheesesteak maker, or one who works in any medium, who desires to transcend merely being good and ascend to a level of greatness. They respect the craft. So I asked Chris Bianco, do they? He said, do they what? Do they experience your soul? He chuckled. He looked down. He said, do they experience my soul? You know, I think, yes, sometimes. Sometimes they do. But enough talking. Let me make you some pizzas. And he did. Thank you.